Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronin from Solitaire Ronin Films, and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the Kino Lorber Carole Lombard Collection 1, which is a box set of 3 of her films on Blu-ray. This is an interesting set, not only because it says Collection 1, so as a huge Carole Lombard fan there might actually be more box sets coming, but it's also a pre-Hays Code box set. Obviously the Hays Code came in at 1934 and actually officially lasted until 1968, even though personally I still think there's some kind of Hays Code in Hollywood. So this set's quite interesting, as I'll talk about, as far as the things that are in the films pre-code, but also because 2 of these films co-star men who would later become her husband or husbands. The films are interesting in that way as well. So obviously the box for Kino Lorber is really thin and fairly cheap, but we're not really interested in the box. So we get Fast and Loose from 1930, directed by Fred Neumeier, and also starring Miriam Hopkins and Frank Morgan, or The Wizard of Oz as we know him better. We get Man of the World, co-starring William Powell, from 1931, directed by Richard Wallace. And finally we have No Man of Our Own with Clark Gable, the only film that they actually co-starred in. They both appeared in a film when they were both kind of extras or little known actors, but this is the only kind of starring vehicle they ever appeared in. And this was directed by Wesley Ruggles. So with Kino Lorber, who are a bit like the premium collection, the extras vary from just a trailer to commentaries, career retrospectives, making ofs. So 2 of these films have commentaries, and the other one just has a trailer. So we'll start with Fast and Loose, which, to be fair, even though Carole Lombard's in it, it's really a Miriam Hopkins film. That's her on the cover. This was Miriam Hopkins' first sound film. This was also, just for trivia, the first film that Carole Lombard actually put the E at the end of Carole, which she then stuck with for the rest of her career. This is probably the weakest of the 3, for me anyway, partly because Carole Lombard's not actually in it as much, because like I say, it's a Miriam Hopkins film really. But this is quite like a lot of the films of the 30s. It's about the difference between rich and poor, the attitudes between rich and poor. So you have Frank Morgan, or as he will be referred to in this video, the Wizard of Oz, who has a daughter, Miriam Hopkins, who has been, because they're rich, she's just pretty much been a party girl, and part of the gay lifestyle, obviously not gay in the meaning of today, but she wants to settle down, so she's engaged to this rich toff. The son is a bit of an alcoholic, and he wants to marry a chorus girl who's played by Carole Lombard, but the family oppose his marriage to a chorus girl because obviously chorus girls have a reputation, but obviously Carole Lombard's not like that, heaven forfend. And Miriam Hopkins realises she doesn't want to marry this toff, and she falls for this guy that she meets initially at the beach. It turns out he's a mechanic, and obviously that causes friction amongst the family, because they don't want to see her married to only a car mechanic, the same way they don't want their son to be married to a chorus girl. But it turns out that the mechanic and the chorus girl, surprise surprise, have better work ethic and are much more moral and upstanding than the spoiled rich kids. Surprise surprise. So it's a story we've kind of seen before, and certainly in that period of the 30s, it was a fairly common theme about money doesn't necessarily make you better, even though America is an extremely capitalist country where people with money are treated better than those without, but that's a different story. One thing I will say about Fast and Loose, the car mechanic that Miriam Hopkins falls for is unbelievably misogynistic and sexist. So to a modern audience, there's people watching that might just switch it off because he's just like, so, women are ornaments and only there for man's pleasure. Women shouldn't drive or vote or have an opinion. The fact of the matter is a lot of people thought that way at that time. To be fair, lots of people in power think of women that way now. It's good to see in 1930 to 2020 not that much has changed. Some things have changed, but not a lot. So people might be a little bit shocked at the misogyny that comes out of this guy's mouth. But you just kind of have to take that as that's just what the times were like. An interesting little fact though, Preston Sturges is credited with the dialogue. It's not written by Preston Sturges, he gets a credit for dialogue, and a lot of the dialogue is very zippy because it's pre-code. There's lots of kind of sexual connotations in it. Obviously throughout these three films the ladies are exposing cleavage and kind of wearing fairly skimpy outfits a lot of the time. In one of the films, Carole Lombard's in her underwear for a couple of scenes, and obviously once the code came in 1934, that put an end to that kind of thing and all that saucy talk. So it's really interesting watching these films and actually seeing quite a lot of flesh. I should say in the film with Clark Gable, there's actually Carole Lombard in the shower, shot from behind. Obviously you can't see much, but you can see the flesh. And obviously the Hays Code put paid to flesh. It is actually quite funny. Miriam Hopkins is wonderful in it. Carole Lombard doesn't have too much to do, but she gives a good turn. The problem is, with the exception of The Wizard of Oz, the male leads just aren't very good. But again, if like me you love Carole Lombard, it is a good film to have. The prints in these, I would say, aren't amazing. Man of the World, the second one's probably the best print, but again, when you consider some of the quality of the DVDs that I've seen in Carole Lombard films, which are almost unwatchable, this set is an upgrade, and hopefully there'll be more sets to come. So the second film is Man of the World with William Powell, which personally I think or in my opinion, is the best one out of the three. William Powell, this was the first time, I don't know if it was the first time we met Carole Lombard, but certainly the first film he worked with, and they would later be married in 1932, so this is 1931, so the year after they would be married. Obviously he was a lot older than her, and the marriage didn't really last that long, but they split up amicably, if I can say that, and remained friends. But this is again, it's a pre-code film, so it's really quite a surprising film. It's set in Paris, and William Powell is a guy who runs this little paper who prints kind of gossip about American tourists falling for Parisian women, and he uses this information for blackmailing the American tourists. So we see him do this to a character at the start of the film, and this character's niece happens to be Carole Lombard, and William Powell's female associate, who they use for the honey trap scheme essentially, says that he should do it to Carole Lombard and get even more money out of his uncle. And you could say predictably for a film, he starts having feelings for Carole Lombard and perhaps questions his life and what he's doing. But the ending of the film was actually quite shocking to me, because you just think it's going to go a certain way because it's a Hollywood film in the 30s, but then you remember, it's a pre-code Hollywood film in the 30s. So the ending is not what you would expect, even though there's a little, perhaps, not happiness in the tale, but yeah, the ending is not what you think it will be. But again, obviously Carole Lombard is the main female lead in the film, so she's in it a lot more. The relationship between her and William Powell is fantastic. The dialogue again is just wonderful. Lombard delivers it with that spark in her eye and that wonderful smile. She has the strength when she needs to have the strength. William Powell is really good in this. I've never really been the biggest William Powell fan, but he's really good in this. There's certainly a dark side to him, and you can see the weight on his character's shoulders as he kind of questions what he's doing with his life, and maybe he should think about giving it up. He gives a really good turn. Again, all these films are like under 85 minutes. This one at like 74 minutes. It really zips along. It's so well crafted. It's just an absolute blast. Again, the chemistry between the two is wonderful. The supporting characters are fantastic. It's bright and breezy, and again, it just has a wonderful ending that is kind of really surprising. So this is the one I would probably say is the best out of the three. But the next one is just as good, but for different reasons. This is No Man of Our Own with Clark Gable. Again, like I said, this is the only film they ever starred together. This is 1932. They weren't married until 1939. They met when both of them were kind of married and going through either separations, I think, or divorces possibly. But allegedly, you know, as Clark Gable was flirting with Carole Lombard, she did say, "Who do you think you are, Clark Gable?" And obviously there's been lots of Hollywood marriages that perhaps were marriages of convenience or to hide one of the marriage's lifestyle choices, shall we say. But by all accounts, Clark Gable and Carole Lombard were one of the happiest marriages Hollywood's ever known. Sadly, we all know that Carole Lombard's career and life was ended much too soon in a plane crash in 1942. That pretty much turned Clark Gable to alcohol, and then he went into the Air Force, allegedly telling people he didn't actually want to survive the war. He kind of came back, obviously a different person, the same way Jimmy Stewart came back a little bit darker, and other people came back. Obviously, war changes people, and he kind of got his career back on track. He married twice more, but when he died in 1960, he was buried next to Carole Lombard. In this film, even though there's a distance between the making of this film and when they would be married and their life together, the scenes between the two of them just absolutely crackle. There's a famous scene, Carole Lombard plays a librarian, Clark Gable's a card shark who goes out to the country to kind of lay low for a little while, meets Carole Lombard. He claims he doesn't fall for people and he's not attached to people, but obviously who could resist Carole Lombard? And there's a scene with Carole Lombard up a ladder trying to find books and Clark Gable admiring the view. Again, this is pre-code, and that scene is just wonderful. The scenes when the two of them are together alone and being close to each other, you can tell the chemistry is there. It's just so wonderful. Again, like I said, the scenes with Carole Lombard in her underwear, there's a scene with her in the shower from behind. It's unimaginable. It's actually quite shocking. You can see why the Hays Code came in. Like I said, there's cleavage in the films. But again, she doesn't realise he's a card shark. He wants to keep her, out of it. But eventually she finds out, and then he claims he's going to South America for 3 months, but there's other reasons for that. Again, the supporting cast is wonderful. The script's wonderful. This one's 85 minutes. It's maybe 5 minutes too long. But again, it's like Man of the World, it's another absolute treat. And I did find, maybe it's just because I'm invested more sometimes than other people in Carole Lombard, the scenes with Clark Gable and Carole Lombard, knowing the history, watching it in 1932, you probably wouldn't have the same feeling, apart from all the flesh on display. But you wouldn't have the same feeling watching Gable and Lombard in 1932 as you do now, knowing their history and knowing what happened. I actually did find it quite moving at times, because obviously in the film they get married on the toss of a coin, because Clark Gable never goes back on the toss of a coin, and I actually did find it quite moving, the scenes where they're married, just because obviously you know what happens in real life to them. It's an absolute blast. It's wonderful. Again, I have the same feelings when watching Carole Lombard films as I do with Kieslowski films. It's a treat that we got the work that we did, and I'm obviously thankful for the films that Carole Lombard made and the films that we can see, even though quite a lot of them are hard to find. But very much like Kieslowski, you are always tinged with a bit of sadness because we should have had a lot more. Another reason why it would be better if Hitler had never been born, because then Carole Lombard wouldn't be in New York selling war bonds and wouldn't have got the plane back instead of the train, which they were booked on, but she didn't want to be away from Clark Gable. And unfortunately that cost her life and career, and cost us a much longer career, because obviously she was known as a comedy actress, and screwball comedies, but for example, in Made for Each Other with Jimmy Stewart, and we kind of saw, you know, she had real talent for drama as well, and I think she would have transformed into that kind of actress as well. And it's a tragedy, but we have, very much like Szysłowski, we have the films that she made, and these three are well worth picking up if you can, and if you have a Region A player, of course, because they are Kino Lorber, so they're Region A. But I mean, I found the set on eBay in the UK for £30, so it's like £10 a Kino Lorber, which is pretty good. Again, if you're a fan of Carole Lombard, it's an essential pickup. If you're kind of a fan or interested in how American cinema looked pre-code, it's amazing how adult some of these films are, certainly the dialogue, and obviously the oodles of flesh on display. It's really quite interesting. And again, you start thinking, well, what if the Hays Code had never existed? What would 30s and 40s cinema look like? Obviously, because we do hold 30s and 40s cinema up to a high regard, but obviously some of them, you know, change the ending somewhat to what it could have been because of the Hays Code. So it's a really interesting set if you're a fan of Carole Lombard, and also from a historical perspective of pre-code Hollywood. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen any of these films, or what's your favourite Carole Lombard film, and hopefully you'll join me again for more videos. This is Solitaire Ronin from Solitaire Ronin Films saying thanks very much for watching, appreciate the support, and hopefully we'll see you again.